So I've got our new 25 MT-07 here on the dyno. I've gone through our break-in process. I've putted it around town a little bit because it's fucking cold outside, and I'm not going to spend that much time out there with it just yet. And here's kind of my initial feedback and impressions, and obviously what it makes bone stock on the dyno. The bike is definitely better in almost every way than the old model. It feels way more planted with proper inverted forks on the bike. The throttle-by-wire makes the initial throttle response much smoother than it ever was before. I don't know what exactly they changed back here with the swing arm and the shock linkage, but it actually feels much more planted and secure than it ever did on the prior generation. My one gripe, though, and this is pretty much my gripe with all Euro 5 Plus compliant bikes, is the tuning is worse than ever. Pretty much all of the Euro 5 bikes I see these days are kind of following the same script because they kind of have to from a emissions compliance standpoint. They are stupidly lean at light throttle. I mean, way leaner than these bikes ever used to be. They're cruising around at like nearly 15 to 1 AFR. Not like the 14.7 to 1 that I bet the O2 is actually trying to target. It's definitely leaner than that in some spots. But a wide open throttle, it's like all they're concerned about is longevity and not really maximizing performance out of these bikes because they have overshot to a large extent where you need to be when it comes to wide open throttle fuel mapping. We're talking like high 11 to 1 range at some places, which is just not what you need to see on an NA internal combustion motorcycle engine of any kind. Now, I've already done actually a whole bunch of passes here just to log a couple different things at part throttle that I was curious to see, but this is how it performs at wide open throttle. It makes a little bit more power than the old bikes did bone stock. You know, they usually made like 64-ish somewhere in there. This is making about 67. I'm going to attribute most of that to just the fact that these don't have that frickin' snorkel in the airbox like the old ones did, because that's about where you got to when you removed the snorkel. But this is what I'm talking about when it comes to air fuel. You're in like the 12 to 1 range here, that's fine, whatever, it's conservative, you don't need to be there, you could definitely lean it out a little bit. But out here, between like 7,000 and 9,500 RPMs, you're talking like, that spot there is like 11.6 to 1 AFR. And that is just so much richer than you ever need to be. These engines are nearly indestructible. They will live all day long at 13 to 1. There's no reason to run it all the way out there, so I truly don't know what Yamaha is trying to accomplish with this. It's certainly not burning cleaner by any means, but it does honestly mean that there's a hell of a lot of room for improvement, even bone stock, especially when you take a look at the power curve out here. I don't know what's going on with the throttle-by-wire system there yet, but it's definitely doing some weird shit, you know, starting around 7,700 RPMs and pretty much falls off at like 10,000, which honestly there's no reason to run these bikes any further than that. We'll probably leave the limiter alone, but there's definitely throttle-by-wire weirdness here. There's definitely some room for improvement here in all the fuel mapping. I'm sure there's room for improvement in the ignition timing, and especially at light throttle where it's running like 15 to 1 AFR, we can make some enormous improvements there. So overall, initial impressions, it's a better bike all around than the prior generation. But I guess thankfully, in a way, the tuning is worse than ever, which means that honestly, we'll be able to provide bigger improvements than ever from how these things roll off the showroom floor to how they perform when they're properly dialed in by someone like us. The exhaust is pretty much the same from the old bike, which means that it just sounds like sewing machines still, but that's not really any big deal. Nobody leaves a stock exhaust on these bikes. We certainly aren't going to either. But there's one thing that actually really does irk me about this bike, and it has nothing to do with emissions compliance or tuning, or really anything that Yamaha advertised. It's what they buried in the fine print. And I don't really know a polite way to bring this up, because it actually kind of pisses me off. On this side of the bike here, you can see I've got it torn apart just so I can get to the ECU and get an accurate tach signal. But those of you that are already maybe knowing what I'm looking for are going to notice pretty quickly that there's something missing on the shift linkage. That's a standard shift rod. There's no shift sensor on there for the quickshifter auto blipper function. And that is rough, because obviously most of us are excited about this bike because it's throttle-by-wire. That's the big update. Yes, the suspension and the frame and the swing arm, all those updates are great, but it's throttle-by-wire, which means we get an auto blipper. Except, apparently, I didn't read the fine print, that is an optional extra on these bikes, meaning that you can purchase it when you're buying the bike at the dealer, but you can't have it yet here in America. There's a part number for it on the EU website, and it's listed as currently not available. I had our local dealer take a look at the availability in the North American site. It's not even listed yet. When we reached out to the rep, it's just not even purchasable yet, actually, if you're at my level or a retail level. And that really, really sucks. Now, obviously, I'm sure Yamaha will have them out shortly. They probably just wanted to get the bikes out to market before the holidays. Fine, whatever. I get that. I understand. Get the bikes sold while people are buying them for, family and loved ones. But just let us buy the blipper. I'm not personally worried because, honestly, I've got a whole box of GYTR blip sensors out there. So I'll just fab one up and plug it into the OEM connector. I'll figure it out. But the average owner shouldn't have to do that. So I really hope these are available, ASAP. But besides that one gripe that I really have with the way the bike is delivered right off the showroom floor, it is definitely an upgrade over the prior generation. We are now going to get the ECU out of the other side of this bike and off to a couple of the software developers we work with so we can go ahead and get some bin file definition support dialed in, and I can go ahead and start doing what we do here, which is tuning. And the next time you guys probably see this back on our dyno, we'll leave it stock for a split second, and then we're going to start installing exhaust systems, and we'll dive into the intake as well to see what we can find in terms of performance improvements that may be possible there. But that's all the time I've got to play with this thing today. If you have any questions about your new 25 MT-07, you want to talk about tuning, I'm always happy to help. Email us, support@dynoworks.com. And if you're looking for the highest quality ECU mapping available for this Yamaha CP2 platform for the prior generation, dynoworks.com. We've got you covered for every intake and exhaust combination you can possibly imagine on every bike that Yamaha has put these things in, guaranteed. You won't find higher quality custom ECU mapping on the market anywhere else because we've flashed thousands more of these bikes than anybody else on the planet.